Well, from the original Axis lock that started it all, to just about every company now throwing their hat into the ring into an ambidextrous crossbar locking mechanism. But you're usually gonna have to fork out more cash in order to get your hands on a knife that has this style of lock. So when I stumbled across the SRM 9211 with its insane modified Tanto trailing point blade shape and crossbar locking mechanism, and I only had to drop $19 on it, I had to get my hands on it. So thanks for joining me on another blade review, Gideon's Tactical family. I invite you to subscribe if you haven't yet. Thrown up content like this every single week, breaking down gear, equipment, and helping you guys make wise choices if the tools are right for you. And there are some really cool attributes to this blade. There are a few things that you're like, okay, that's why it's $19. So let me hit some of the awesome aspects first before I highlight a few of the drawbacks. I'll have links in the description box below if you're interested. Over Blade HQ is where I picked it up. Amazon has them. You can get them in several different color combinations. You're looking at a 3.5 inch blade lengths. Looking at about an 1/8 of an inch thick on 8CR13 MOV steel. We haven't really seen that steel in a while. I haven't reviewed a blade with that in several months. And they Rockwell this at 57 to 59, so it's a little bit better than what you would normally see. It's usually 56 to 58.
But it's a little like strapping a supercharger to a Vespa. Yes, you will be getting more performance out of it, but it's still a scooter. How much cooler and faster can you really make it?
With a trailing point style, so I love that. I love that styling on it, it's so cool. Then we have a modified Tanto, so we have a mild case of a sweep on that tip into a transition point and then a sweeping belly down. So, I mean, that blade shape is extremely unusual. I don't know if I've seen it on another knife. If I have, it's probably only been one. We have a mild swedge and it's a high saber grind. And the blade performance is interesting. Obviously, piercing is excellent. It will pierce and penetrate any packaging that you may need to cut through. You know, your kid's new Hot Wheel toy or whatever shows up at the door, you're gonna easily be able to get into the plastic and, you know, carve it out. And once you get that cut going, I mean, it just slices because of that geometry of the blade, but also piercing into even a frozen stump. It dug deep into that. So that was really well. And even carving on some wood, I was pleased with the way it was going through. Cordage, excellent. The one kind of bogging down or two areas is definitely food prep. It's definitely not really set up for that, and the grind just isn't good for that. And I even saw it bogging down a little bit more than I would prefer on cardboard slicing. I think that's just because it's a very narrow blade shape and then the saber grind. If it was a full flat grind, which will be a competitive option I'll roll in here in a moment for you of a similar style at a budget-friendly price as well, a different blade. This one definitely has a lot of capability. It just is limited slightly on the slicing capability through food and cardboard. Now to the deployment and pivot and crossbar lock. Now we got a small pivot there for sure, with a torque screw on one side and then their little accent there on the other. You got good engagement for that crossbar on two little springs. No idea how strong these springs are. You know, long-term use will determine that, you know, but it seems to be bouncing back into place as it should. You can pull those back and then whip it out without even touching the blade and then collapse and swing it back into place without much effort. So that's very nice to see. So the action is good for a blade that's running, from what I can tell, on either nylon or Teflon bushing or washers. You know, it's a cheaper material that are the washers that are being used, but it's still fast and smooth enough with just a slight flick of the wrist. You don't even have to touch the disc plate. Now it's an ambidextrous disc plate with a nice little torque screw as well to hold it into place, jimping all around. That's not aggressive. And they even milled the handle scale enough so that you can easily purchase it. I have no problem with this style of deployment. It's very easy to use. You can just see there, sometimes because of those washers, you know, it just gets a little, there we go, come on, there we go. You definitely do have to do a little bit of a wrist flick more than what a knife with ball bearings would do. And there is the stop bar, which is decent for the size of, you know, light duty EDC, and the crossbar lock is a good thickness as well. We definitely have a little side to side play. Not really feeling anything up and down. So a little bit of wiggle side to side, nothing up and down. Now the handle is 4.8 inches long, so you're gonna get a lot of real estate to hold on to, even though it's quite slim. So it's a slim, narrow, lightweight blade coming in at 2.9 ounces, and that's because it has steel liners. Hopefully you guys can see them there. in there. They've milled out the steel liners, and then you got G10 handle scales. They have several different color combinations, tan, orange, and black currently when I am doing this video with, I would say, light texturing on them. There's texture, but it's light. And then a spacer in the back with a lanyard hole right back there. And then a deep ride loop over pocket clip with recessed screws. I mean, there's not a lot to complain about. There are two things mainly that I noticed. One, this is set up to be a totally ambidextrous blade, no lefty pocket clip attachment. That's just silly. There's no reason to do that. It would have been great to have this as an ambidextrous tool. That's a miss in my opinion. And then the other aspect are the handle scales themselves. What I discovered on my model was that the tolerance around the pivot, because there's only two attachment points, you have a screw back here on either side to screw those scales into the steel, and then this very small pivot, well, the tolerances aren't quite tight enough apparently on this pivot hole for the G10. So I was finding that when I got it, there was slight, I don't know if you guys can hear it, shifting, like just micronic shifting on the scales. I tightened down the pivot and it seems to, like, it's probably 98% gone. I can, if I really squeeze the neck really hard and try and like move the scales, I can feel just maybe a micronic movement. I mean, I could take the scales off and glue them down and then tighten them down if that was really driving me crazy, and maybe that's just a fluke on my model. But that is something, you know, for $19. And I did want to run in that competitive option, the CJRB Goby. This is a budget-friendly option, usually about $35 to $40, depending on the color combination that you go with. Those will be in the links below as well. Now, this is a natural trailing point versus the kind of modified Tanto, so still very usable, just not quite as stand-out-ish in the blade. This is going to have basically a full flat grind, so it is slicier than the SRM on the 9211. That particular grind is just not quite as slicey. And you're just going to notice little things. That extra $15 to $20 is going to make, you know, the handle scales are contoured and rounded versus the flat on the 9211. It's ambidextrous with a loop over, you know, deep ride. So lefties, you're going to like that more. Now, the ball bearings on the pivot also, and just kind of a larger pivot overall, are also a nice touch and a little bit smoother action on the flipper versus, you know, the plate deployment, depending on if you like that. And then it has a proprietary steel that CJRB is using that is very similar to like a mixture of Sandvik 14C28N and D2. So you'll get a better edge retention as well, but you're not going to get that crossbar locking mechanism, which with the combination of the cool styling of the blade, that's why you would be, in my opinion, picking up this SRM 9211. So if you've never owned one, you're just wanting to get your foot in the door and maybe like see how it works, they have a few other models from this SRM brand that you could take a look at and, you know, test out for yourself for not much more. And it's just a really cool, very unique blade for a very inexpensive price and can get you your foot in the door to a crossbar lock. I invite you to subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber. Check out the other video popping up. And until next time, always remember, stay equipped, stay prepared, and I'll see you guys out there.